I'm going to stop drinking. And I'm going to stop drinking for 2 months. And let's just try this thing and see what happens. So after about 7 days, holy cow, I felt lighter. Like literally my mind, my body, everything felt better. There was more joy in my life. And by about 10, 14 days into this thing, I literally felt like a different person. And that is really why I've made a commitment not to drink anymore. And the difference for me, the biggest thing is I want to be a better father.
Welcome back to The Donkey and the Bee with your hosts, Brett and Laura Shakavis, where we talk all things marriage, entrepreneurship, and finances. And today we're talking about, I'd say, a hot topic again. We are discussing the topic of drinking alcohol. Now, we know that this holiday season is a big time where you get together with friends and family and coworkers, and usually there is a lot of alcohol around. And sometimes you kind of get pulled into it, right? Like, oh, everyone else is drinking, I'm just going to drink too. Well, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about why Brett and I actually decided to stop drinking, kind of the ramifications of why we chose that, and just different stories and real life applications on that as well.
So this is not something that we just all of a sudden, hey, it's getting close to December, let's quit drinking. This is something that I've been struggling with, I think, my whole adult life, and have made progress through it. I think when we were first married into early 20s, before we had Brooklyn, like I was a hot mess of a drinker, and it was just all or nothing, right? Like it was just, man, I would drink and then pass out. And like, it was before we had kids and we were still in college, and it was rambunctious. But I started there and really abusing alcohol. And then after we had kids, it was a very hard and long road for me to get these things under control, kind of mature, become an adult, right? And, really the last, Brooklyn's 12 years old now. So pretty much her whole life, I have kept it very mellow with drinking, but it's still been very much a daily part of my life. And so I think it's been, 10 plus years since I've been like drunk, like when we were in our 20s being stupid. But nonetheless, there's still about every day it was like, hey, let's have, a beer or two or a glass of wine or two. And we both cook and we love food and we love wine, right? Our background is in restaurants. I was a sommelier. We love wine and expensive wine and craft beer and craft cocktails, all that kind of stuff, right? But it became such a part of life. And I think that it gets sold as like part of the dining experience, right? Mm-hmm. Especially since we came from, high-end restaurants and sommelier and those kind of things. It just became part of that like European sexy culture of, we're going to have these great, food that we're going to cook every night. We'll pop open a bottle of wine and we'll sit around the table as a family. And there was no problems, right? There was no abuse of alcohol anymore. No one's getting drunk and stupid. But nonetheless, it was a addiction that I still had like every single day. Come around 5 o'clock, it was like, hey, let's wind down, right? The day is done. Let me crack a beer. We're going to hang out with the girls. We're going to start making dinner and kind of like transition. And it was like that little switch that I used alcohol to switch into a let's decompress kind of thing. And it was every single day. And I still thought that was a problem. And I did not have a solution to that problem for many years, where this has been something we'd gone back and forth on in several conversations, and me expressing to you that, hey, I do want to stop drinking, or I want to drink less. And we had tried many things, you and I both, on cutting back, but it's such a slippery slope that you always just kind of fall back into the pattern, especially where barbecuing steaks or something like that. It's like, hey, let's open a big bottle of red wine and let's, hang out with the family. And it never became something that I wanted it to. So I want to talk about that today. Really now I'm in a spot where I want to be as far as my alcohol control of the consumption. So I think it's a good talk for people to understand why and how we did this decision of giving up alcohol completely.
So you mentioned that you've struggled with this pretty much your younger adult life. And so I've been a witness of that. And I guess want to ping pong a question back to you as to what made you finally decide that you wanted to stop drinking.
Well, so part of it was I read this book, and The author is Annie Grace, and the book is This Naked Mind. And there were two things in here that were really impactful. One of them is she does a very great job of putting alcohol into a context of an actual poison. And I had to have a mental shift on what alcohol is. When you think, beer, wine, you think, well, it's just natural. It's grapes that have been fermented, right? It's grain that has been fermented. It's a natural thing, right? It's a God-made thing. It's part of the earth, right? It should not be poisonous, shouldn't be a problem. But I had to reprogram myself to think, okay, well, really, alcohol is a poison. Ethanol is a poison. And even though it is a natural chemical byproduct of things that are naturally made here on this earth, it doesn't mean that it's not poisonous to humans. There's plenty of things on this earth that are natural, that occur in nature, that are still poisonous to people, right? Like there's plenty of things humans should not ingest, and ethanol is one of those things. And so it helped me to reframe it in my mind of like, okay, well, why would I want to put a poison in my body, right? Like if you justify it to say, well, a little poison's fine, like that's kind of the social norm, right? Like, hey, are you controlling the amount of alcohol you're handling? Because then you're a mature adult if you're only drinking a little bit of poison. And that's so ridiculous. Like, how does that make sense if you switch the word alcohol for poison or beer for poison, right? Like it legitimately is poisoning your body, and it has negative effects on your body, and it has had a lot of negative effects on mine. So when I had that mental switch and kind of spent some time, I guess, reprogramming my subconscious mind to say, hey, this is a poison. Why would I want to put it in my body?
I take the approach that it's a drug. It really is a drug. And I actually saw this video the other day of a gentleman saying that alcohol is the only drug of choice that if you don't use it, people think you're strange if you're not doing it. And so I thought that was such an interesting perspective, and it flipped my mentality on the way I look at alcohol, because I didn't really look at it as a drug before. I look at like smoking really negatively. I look at doing like methamphetamines and hard drugs negatively, the use of narcotics negatively. And so I feel like it's almost in that category, but I think that it's so fluffified in our culture that it's not looked at it that way in our culture. It's just a glass of wine with your steak, and like, the white wine in the summer, with your salads. And it's incorporated in our minds to where we're honestly kind of brainwashed toward alcohol for it to be a good social thing. You're not being a good social human if you're not having a glass of wine or a hard liquor in your hand while you're conversing with other people. And so I think it's just my mindset, my mind shift change that really helped me understand that, hey, if you think all these other things are bad, this is just as bad. And so why are you not categorizing it appropriately in my mind?
Yeah. So I think it's like the marketing, literally like the alcohol companies, the marketing, right? You think about milk, right? It's good for your bones. That is such a marketing lie. Like it is literally, milk is not good for you, right? But nonetheless, it has been sold for generations that it is. It started with literally a milk company branding this lie. It's the exact same thing with wine. Red wine is good for your heart. That literally came from a wine company. It did not come from a doctor's study or anything like that, right? Like that has been in our culture for several generations, and people use it and they cling onto it to justify really what they want for themselves, even though it's not good for them.
And I'm going to say I am guilty of this. When I went gluten-free, so I wasn't drinking beer anymore, I was like, okay, well, what could be a replacement for that? And my replacement was cider. And so hard cider, not the Martinelli cider. And so I would look in the grocery store and I would look at all the ingredients in these ciders, and I was trying to find one with no natural flavors. That was like my thing, right? Because I didn't want to have natural flavors, because natural flavors are really bad in my mind. But now that I think about it, when I'm looking back on my reasoning on that, it was like, well, you have all these sulfites and like all these other ingredients that are in the cider that I was totally ignoring and just looking at one ingredient and trying to, push that out, when I wasn't looking at the full spectrum of it, of like, hey, this is literally poison, what Brett was just mentioning earlier. It's poisoning my body. The sulfites are known to not be good for your body. And so why was I ignoring that? I think we all just have a perspective, right? A lens that we look through that like blurs out certain things and kind of clarifies certain things. And so I was just choosing to blur out that certain ingredient and focus on one ingredient. So I've completely have a clear lens on now and looking at it like it's all poison. It's all not good for me. There's no real health benefits to it. Even we're going to go into a little bit more detail about, the calming effect, and it helps and alleviates my stress. But we'll talk about it later. But there's no benefits to it. If you look it up, benefits of alcohol, there's only going to be negative effects of alcohol, no benefits.
It's true. So I wanted to transition and talk about this question that I was asked myself. So I was asked, would you give up alcohol for the rest of your life for $500,000? And when I was asked that, it was not a yes, for sure I would, right? Like I literally sat there for 2-3 minutes and I started calculating how long it would take me to make $500,000. And then after I realized, okay, I just calculated all this stuff to see how much time and effort it would take me to make an extra 500 grand. It's like, man, like there is a real problem here. Like alcohol has a grip on me if I cannot give it up in like an instant for 500 grand, right? If I need to be like, okay, well, how many more deals do I need to do, right? Like, no, that's that. So I heard this question, I thought through this, and then I had this aha moment that like, whoa, perhaps alcohol has more hold on me than I am registering. Perhaps it has more power in my life than I was willing to give it credit for. So this was maybe 6 months ago, and it had started like this, snowball of me going through this, kind of reprogramming my mind and really kind of preparing myself to get to a point where I was ready to consciously like make a decision and say, hey, I'm going to cut alcohol off.
So for me personally, I think I consciously decided not to drink. I was along with you. I kind of was like, if you want to stop drinking, I'll stop drinking. No problem for me. I have this weird personality thing or trait or something that if I think something has a hold on me, I'm like, I'll cut it. Like tortilla chips. If anyone knows me, they know that I love chips and salsa. It's my favorite snack. I just love it. I know it's not good for me, but it's just my one thing that I feel like it's just my thing. But there came a time where I was like, I'm eating too many chips. I'm going to cut it off. I'm not going to eat it for, I think, 6 months. And so I just did. I was like, I'm not going to eat it. And so I just stopped eating them. And it wasn't easy. It wasn't like, oh, I can see chips and salsa and not salivate. No, I really wanted the chips and salsa every time I saw it. But I don't know. I have this, I think it's a game, an internal game for me of like, if I think something has control over me, I'm like, oh no, I'm going to prove that wrong. And so I think when you said you wanted to stop drinking, I was like, all right, I'll do it with you too. Like it wasn't something that was, oh, it's going to be so hard. Like I didn't have that feeling toward it. I think because I had been doing a lot of research on the effects of alcohol as well. And for those of you who don't know, Brett and I own an assisted living and memory care home here in Georgetown, Texas. And I think seeing the effects of memory loss and, Alzheimer's and dementia, the effects that it has on individuals, the effects it has on families, I've researched it a lot and wanting to know what I can do to detour something like that in my life. And so there have actually been a few individuals in our home that have come into our home with dementia because of alcohol-related illnesses. And so I think seeing that is a huge eye-opener for me personally. And then doing research on my own on the effects of the brain and the effects of your heart and the effects of all of these things in your body, it literally negatively affects every part of your body. And so reading that and just educating myself, I think was an empowering thing for me personally to realize this is not good for me. I need to not do it.
That's true. So in my mind, as part of my education on this, I had initially thought if I'm not getting drunk, then I'm in control of this problem, or it's not a problem, right? I'm in control of alcohol because I'm limiting myself to 2 beers or 2 glasses of wine. But then I was learning, and I came across this study that said that alcohol stays in your body for 10 to 14 days, and its effects are there. So then I was like, well, what effects? Like, what is happening in my body? So then I was like, okay, well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to stop drinking, and I'm going to stop drinking for 2 months, and let's just try this thing and see what happens. So after about 7 days, holy cow, I felt lighter. Like literally my mind, my body, everything felt better. There was more joy in my life. And by about 10, 14 days into this thing, I literally felt like a different person. And that is really why I've made a commitment not to drink anymore. And the difference for me, the biggest thing is I want to be a better father. And for me, I'm a very intense, aggressive person. And I attributed that to maybe just my testosterone levels, maybe being a man. Like, I don't know, like I feel like there's always a fire, like a passion burning inside me. And some of the times I direct that towards very good things like, business and things like that. But a lot of times it kind of just bubbled up inside as like frustration. And anytime our girls would do something, it would be a small deal, and I would be like overly reacting, overly frustrated, overly impatient, and really would just like, I just wasn't being the father I really wanted to be. And I couldn't figure out why. I mean, I was fighting this. We had many conversations for, a decade or more. Like, how do I become less aggressive, more patient, more loving, more joyful? And then within that 10-day period of no alcohol in my system, it was just like, there it is. Like, there was no trying. It was just like the fire of frustration inside of me just like simmered down. And it was just like, okay, I'm still me, but I'm like more joyful. I'm more peaceful. Have so much more patience with our girls. And really that's the biggest why, because that first 7 days, like every single day around 5 o'clock, I wanted to have a beer. And I literally told myself, no, Brett, you want to be a better father. This is more important. Your daughters are more important than the alcohol. And then after about 2 weeks, it was like, oh, I kind of forgot about alcohol. I don't really think about it anymore. Sometimes we're making steaks or something, like, oh, it'd be nice to have a bottle of wine. But then it's like, it's really no big deal now. But ultimately, I feel lighter. Like like my mental space, I just feel smarter, faster, stronger, more patient. Like I just feel everything that I wanted to be is closer to that now.
I didn't know that was one of the reasons why you stopped drinking.
Really?
You never said that before.
Oh my goodness. It was top secret information. I'm only telling you.
Nobody knows now.
Right?
My parents didn't really drink when I was a kid, so I never saw a quote unquote responsible drinker, if there is such a thing. So when we started dating, we were in our last years of college, and we had just gotten out of kind of an unhealthy church situation. And so we weren't drinking in this church, but then after we kind of left that, we were. And so it was kind of a learning experience for me on like drinking, and I would drink too much, and I didn't learn that as quickly as I would hope that I would learn that. So we didn't really have, I guess, the best example of how to drink or not to drink, really. And so I wanted to be that example. And so Brett does as well for our girls, to show them that you don't have to drink to have fun. I think that's super important to note. There have been many circumstances where I love to karaoke. And I think that's one thing that everyone should know. I love it. It's like my favorite thing to do. And I get up there and I'm a completely different person. And people are always, when I'm done, they go, oh my goodness, how many drinks have you had? I'm like, none. Like I've had no drinks whatsoever. I just love doing that. And I want them to experience that too. I want them to be able to do things without having to chill or get the edge off with, a glass of wine or a beer, because you don't need that. I think it's like a state of mind, right? Like if you want to have a good time in doing a certain thing, you're going to have a good time because you're choosing that attitude, right? And so being that example is definitely probably the most important reason why we decided to stop drinking.
So to add on to that, even before we decided to stop drinking, we were very active with teaching our girls about alcohol. And obviously we'd have wine and beer with dinner and things like that. but I don't think our girls have ever seen us get drunk because I don't think we've really done that while they were alive. But nonetheless, they've seen almost daily us having wine and things like that with dinner, going out and having a glass of wine and stuff like that. So we were very vocal about it, showing them, hey, here is how you do drink, right? Here's 1 glass, 2 glasses, then we're done, right? And really not shots, not anything crazy, right? We're showing them. And I think that was super important for us, but I think that we have now matured even further in that and are now showing them, hey, here is why mom and dad have decided to stop drinking, right? Here are the research that we've looked at. They have met plenty of these grandmas who have passed away and they've had alcohol-induced dementia, and they know them by name and they see the effects of it at the end of life. And so we're able to put that in context for them. Like, here is abuse, right? This is what it looks like after years of abuse at the end of life. You have this to look forward to if you abuse alcohol. But let me show you how to do it well. And I think I'm now past that, where I want to say, hey, here's how you don't drink alcohol, right? We were very adamant with not smoking. We're very adamant about not taking a lot of pills and things unless you really need to. Why is alcohol not in that same category? And so I think that as we have now kind of matured a little bit more, we're now showing the girls, hey, this is us learning from our previous maybe thoughts or mistakes, and now saying we have grown ourselves, and let me take you along and show you what we are learning and why we have decided to stop drinking altogether. Well, thank you for joining us on this episode of The Donkey and the Bee. I hope that our look into real life, my struggles, and how I have overcome these things, the better father that I am now, has had some type of impact for you. I hope that it can help you decide how alcohol has a role in your own life and perhaps become a better version of yourself. So thank you for joining us, and we will see you next round.